This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. You are entering the Stone Zone. For yet another day, we see images of cars being set on fire, ICE officers being attacked, rocks, bottles, chunks of concrete, baggies full of feces and urine being hurled at ICE vehicles and officers, protesters blocking traffic. Yesterday they tried to close down the 101 freeway, and they are laying siege to federal buildings. President Donald Trump has ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to the scene. Governor Gavin Newsom argues that that is unconstitutional. Actually, President Eisenhower sent National Guard troops to Arkansas. It was challenged and found to be constitutional. George Wallace objected when President John Kennedy sent National Guard troops to Alabama to enforce integration, once again upheld by the Supreme Court. Gavin Newsom is posturing. See, he is a guy whose political fortunes were largely in the toilet because of the quality of life issues in California, exacerbated by his terrible handling of the recent fires. Now he orchestrated this entire charade with ICE Concho Tom Homan. Homan never threatened to arrest the governor, Gavin Newsom. He said any public official who harbored an illegal, who interfered with the arrest of an illegal, or who otherwise assaulted an ICE officer would be arrested. That criteria does not meet Gavin Newsom, but Newsom used it to try to taunt Homan, saying, "Come on, big guy, arrest me." In his dreams, his arrest would only make him a hero on the radical left. I continue to predict that this insurrection is much, much larger than just Los Angeles. This is the precursor to what we saw in this country in 2020. You remember that. In the period between May 26th and October 31st, we had 19 confirmed deaths. In Chicago, there were 15 fatalities alone. Several more in Minneapolis, St. Paul. 284 Chicago police officers were injured. Over 2,000 police officer injuries across the entire country. At the same time, you had over $2 billion of damage to both public and private property. Damage in Minneapolis, where this all began, saw $500 million in damage at about 1,500 different property locations. You'll recall at that juncture, although some urged President Trump to send in the National Guard, he elected to let the governors make that decision. That left the decision in Minnesota up to Tim Walz, and he did not move quickly, causing enormous damage. Donald Trump clearly not going to make that mistake again, acting very aggressively. I believe that there is actually a planned insurrection here. An excellent report by Peter Duke at the Duke Report lays this at the feet of Nicholas Berggruen and his Berggruen Institute, and makes a very strong case. But I would like to see FBI Director Kash Patel conduct an intensive investigation to see who is orchestrating this. These are paid professional agitators, most of them wearing black masks. The pallets of bricks, which people tell me I'm imagining, but which I've seen with my own eyes, are coming from somewhere. And proof that this is going to merely spread is the fact that radical leftist organizations have announced that they're organizing a nationwide protest against President Donald Trump and his deportation of illegals for June 14th. The so-called No Kings protests are being orchestrated by extremist groups like the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Democratic Socialists of America, Indivisible, and the 50501 movement. Now, these groups claim to be organizing over 1,800 demonstrations in all 50 states to disrupt law and order, vilify President Trump, and demonize immigration and customs from doing its job. If the demonstrations remain peaceful, well, then under our Constitution, folks are allowed to do that. I'm prepared to wager today that they will not remain peaceful because that is not their intention. Notably, the group will be holding a protest in Z saying that No Kings is hosting an event in Washington. They will have major flagship march and rallies in Philadelphia to draw a clear contrast between our people-powered movement and the costly, wasteful, and un-American birthday parade in Washington. These people are deranged. And the president's parade to honor our military, it's about time. The groups are exploiting the day the president's holding that patriotic U.S. Army 250th anniversary parade in Washington, D.C. in order to push their anti-American agenda. The protest website that I read says they've defied our courts, deported Americans, disappeared people off the streets, attacked our civil rights, and slashed our services. That is a description of the Biden administration, as a matter of fact. That's a description of the Obama administration. Disappeared our people. You mean removed violent, illegal criminals from the United States? Defied our courts? No, actually, Trump has managed to prevail in court, although unfortunately, he's had to appeal several times to get to a court that would overrule hack Democrat partisan judges from issuing rulings. For example, the ruling by Jed Boasberg in the D.C. District Court that Donald Trump didn't have the authority to deport dangerous illegals. Of course he does, Judge. You actually know he does. Overturned by the Supreme Court. Then you had the Court of International Trade, which no one has ever heard of before this. They ruled that Donald Trump doesn't have the authority to negotiate tariff agreements with our trading partners. Now, they agreed that Barack Obama had that authority, Joe Biden had that authority, even George W. Bush had that authority, but now suddenly this three-judge panel of leftists have decided that Donald Trump does not have that authority. So to the extent that there is judicial tyranny in this country, it's coming not from the right, but from the left. Just remember Alinsky's rules. Saul Alinsky was a famous leftist who wrote a rule book, and the first of his rules was always blame your opposition for exactly what you yourself are doing, and that is what we have seen from the radical left. The protests are scheduled to take place less than a week after this huge mass anarchy in Los Angeles, where the ICE raids, which began on June 6th, triggered riots that saw, at least so far, 11 police officers injured, a number of Waymo taxis torched, the 101 freeway turned into a war zone, with protesters again hurling concrete, rental scooters, bricks, rocks, stones, bottles, and other unmentionables. Walmart heiress Christy Walton is funding full-page ads in the New York Times to promote No King's Day, urging a national day of defiance and calling for the people to rise up. Therefore, I am calling on all Americans to boycott Walmart. Don't give your money to people who hate America. It looks like the Walmart dynasty is big mad about the China tariffs. That's because they're in bed with the Chinese. Alex Jones responded to the No Kings ad by saying, "This is a Communist Chinese front group, and it is openly organized an attempt to overthrow the United States on June 14th. He added that the group is also George Soros-backed. Indivisible, that's the organizer behind that week's No Kings protest, received $7 million from George Soros. So once again, we see the usual suspects. Meanwhile, Mexico's president is actually egging on the violent insurrectionists in Los Angeles. Mexico's president this past Sunday poured gasoline on the fire, essentially joined the ongoing insurrection in L.A. while threatening the United States with more mayhem. After violence broke out on Friday against ICE agents conducting multiple raids in downtown L.A., Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum began egging on the violent protesters and lashing out at the Trump administration for trying to enforce the law. During a speech in Mexico City, Sheinbaum hailed the rioters, those who are hurling rocks, bottles, chunks of concrete, baggies of urine and feces at ICE and police officers as good men and women who just want to support their families. Mexicans living in the United States are good men and women, honest people who went to the United States to seek a better life and to support their families. Sheinbaum is absolutely right. Those Mexicans who came here illegally have done exactly that. Those Mexicans who came here illegally are not doing so properly. They are, by the way, taking jobs that belong to Americans, and they have to be deported. They can go apply for citizenship and to enter the country in the legal way, in which many Mexican Americans have. If necessary, we'll mobilize. We don't want taxes on remittance from our fellow countrymen. Remittance makes up about 4% of Mexico's gross domestic product. So she's threatening another insurrection against America for tax money flowing out of our country to her. You have to wonder what the thinking is here. If you're just tuning in, this is Roger Stone. This is the Stone Zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks. We're taking a deep dive into the L.A. riots, as well as what the political motivations of Gavin Newsom are. Yesterday, we visited with John Phillips of KABC in Los Angeles, who explained that this is Gavin Newsom's strategy to get around the real frontrunner for the 2028 presidential nomination on the Democrat side. That would be Kamala Harris, perhaps soon to be Governor Kamala Harris. So you can see Gavin Newsom furiously operating to take advantage of this tragedy in Los Angeles. It is nothing more than naked politics, folks. But that's what you come to the Stone Zone for us to expose the naked politics of what happens every day in our nation's capital and across the country. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Joining us shortly, Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He thinks President Trump should enact the Insurrection Act to counteract the coming revolt, an effort to overturn and overthrow his administration. We'll be talking to him in just a little bit. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
My name is Lily, and I've had hidradenitis suppurativa, HS, for years. I finally found some relief since taking Cosentyx. Relief means I can show up more.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your dermatologist about Cosentyx.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said today that he is firing all 17 members of a government panel of vaccination advisors. A clean sweep is needed to reestablish public confidence in vaccine science, Secretary Kennedy told the Wall Street Journal. Kennedy is removing all members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP, which advises the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The group reviews vaccination data and makes recommendations that determine who is eligible for shots and whether insurers should cover them, among other things. Kennedy and his HHS will put the restoration of public trust above any pro or anti-vaccination agenda. He added that many of the members of the committee were last-minute appointees of the Biden administration, and noted that without ousting advisors from the current group, the Trump administration would not have been able to appoint a majority of the new board until 2028. Kennedy says the panel, as appointed by Biden, is plagued with persistent conflict of interest and had become little more than a rubber stamp for any vaccination. Seems to me that anyone who's on a vaccination advisory committee should not be taking money from a vaccination manufacturer or provider. Sounds to me like what the president called it during the campaign. Common sense. The advisory overhaul is just the latest move by Kennedy to institute more objective protocols and remove big pharma industry insiders from controlling the regulation of vaccinations in the United States, all since he took the helm at HHS. Under Kennedy, HHS has stopped recommending routine COVID-19 vaccinations for healthy children and newborns and healthy pregnant women. We are covering the LA riots, but nobody more knowledgeable than our upcoming guest. Colonel Douglas MacArthur is a decorated combat veteran, a former top advisor to the Secretary of Defense, and he has called on President Trump to enact the Insurrection Act. I trust Colonel Macgregor implicitly to be able to see what is coming down the road. He joins us momentarily. Thank you for tuning in to the Stone Zone, where we bring you the stone cold truth 5 days a week. The inside skinny on American politics, who is doing what to whom and why. It's all right here in the Stone Zone. Whatever you do, please don't touch that dial, because we want you to hear this terrific interview with Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and that is coming right up.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. Joining me now is former U.S. Army Colonel retired, a combat veteran, former top advisor to the Secretary of Defense. Douglas Macgregor is as I say, a decorated combat veteran, an author of 5 books, a PhD, and an expert in both defense and foreign policy matters. He is the geopolitical strategic thinker that I admire the most. He's very famous within our military because in the Battle of 73 Easting, he led the U.S. Army's largest tank attack since World War II, and also for his groundbreaking books on military transformation. We're honored to have Colonel Douglas Macgregor with us today in the Stone Zone. Colonel Macgregor, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Roger. Glad to be with you.
So yesterday I noticed that you called on President Donald Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act in response to the anti-ICE riots in Los Angeles. Can you tell us what additional police powers the president would gain by invoking the Insurrection Act and why you believe he should do so?
Hey, thanks for asking. This is an important question, and I thought I should be urging the president to act because I was afraid that too many other people in his inner circle would urge him to do nothing. I'm concerned, and I think the president needs to be concerned because the Insurrection Act gives him federal power that he otherwise doesn't have. Nowhere in the Constitution of the United States will you find the words martial law. The president does not have the authority to establish martial law. Some governors do, and local military commanders can, but the president does not. But the Insurrection Act that was passed in 1807 at Thomas Jefferson's urging gives him the power to federalize local militia, National Guard, local police, as well as to bring in federal troops, that is, regular Army and Marines, in the event that certain conditions seem to be met. And those conditions involved outright contempt for authority, destruction of private property, threats to the bodily harm to not only the agents of the local government and police, but to federal officers and to the population at large. And what we're seeing now in Los Angeles suggests that this is very, very serious, much more serious than most people realize.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Pardon me. He is the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice. You can find him at ourcountryourchoice.com. He's also written a number of excellent books on military strategy and history. Colonel Macgregor spent a year at VMI, 4 years at West Point, and retired with the rank of colonel. He served in the Trump administration as a top advisor to the Secretary of Defense, and he has been outspoken in his opposition to a strike on Iran. In fact, Colonel Macgregor, your oration on that is so good, we've played it several times here on the show. You've called for the president to now bring back all U.S. ground troops from overseas and employ them inside America to restore the rule of law. And to help execute these mass deportations. It was on this show, I recall you saying, that the Army should be utilized in the deportation operation. How do you see an operation of that size unfolding, and how many million illegals do you think we actually need to deport?
Well, the true estimates, not necessarily the ones that are locally admitted to, and certainly not by people on the Hill, but the true estimates are that we have about 50 million people inside the United States who are illegally here. In other words, they broke the laws in order to enter the country. Of that number, almost 30 million came in under President Biden when he effectively opened the borders and essentially suspended the rule of law, letting these people in without any vetting or any prior examination of any kind. Now, historically, we have been through deportations before. In 1929, after the stock market crash, President Herbert Hoover signed an executive order that resulted in the deportation of 9 million Mexicans. Now, why did he do that? Because he wisely concluded that they had jobs that Americans under normal circumstances might not do. But with the onset of the Depression, Americans would be desperate for ways to make money. And what he didn't want was a war inside the United States between American citizens and non-citizens doing jobs Americans needed. Franklin Roosevelt deported another 3.5 million. Harry Truman deported another 2.2 million. And Eisenhower ultimately deported somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 million. Now, in every case, these people were deported because they were not legally in the country, but they were also deported because they held down jobs that Americans needed. The United States Army was involved in all of those deportations to a greater or lesser extent. Why would the United States Army, that is the regular Army, be involved? Because they can mobilize the transportation assets, they can ensure the professional conduct of the deportations, and they can protect the citizens that are being deported. from each other as well as from Americans and protect Americans from them. So this is a natural thing for the Army to do. And by the way, the Marines, as a regular element of the ground force, have also been involved in these things. But when you look at the numbers that are involved, it's going to take a force the size of both the Marines and the Army to get the job done.
Brilliant thinking, in which I completely agree. What I see here, Colonel Macgregor, and I think you agree with this is the precursor to a rerun of what we saw in 2020, where these so-called riots, which are really planned, orchestrated insurrections, very well funded, very well planned, will break out across the country. Chicago being after Minneapolis, Chicago and Los Angeles being two of the worst examples. In that instance, President Trump unfortunately listened to advisors who told him to let the governors decide about the use of the National Guard. And I think it is a decision that he regrets. It's also clearly a decision that he's not going to make again. I wondered if you had seen the advertising for the so-called No Kings protests planned for this weekend. The No Kings protest is backed by a number of radical left organizations, including one funded by George Soros. Are we about to see a replay of 2020?
Yes, I think we're at the beginning of this process. I think we're going to see this stretch through the balance of the summer and into the fall. First of all, let's get something straight right up front. So important that you brought this up. We have discovered cell phones found in the possession of people that participated in the riots and the destruction of private property, the attacks on police officers in Los Angeles. They've traced these cell phones back to people in Bel Air, Beverly Hills, and other wealthy neighborhoods, all the way back to Manhattan in New York City. In other words, we know within a reasonable distance just who is ultimately funding all of this, because none of this would happen without copious amounts of money. We've got people on film passing out extremely expensive biohazard masks to people, as well as cell phones, and also, as we saw before, as you pointed out in 2020, large numbers of bricks and stones and other things showing up. I think before long we'll also see weapons confiscated. The point is that you're 100% right. These are well orchestrated, well funded. That man that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, mentioned as having been found, who was throwing bricks at police cars, he's the tip of a proverbial iceberg. Any number of people can be bought, put on the street, and told, hey, throw rocks at the police. That's not problematic. The people that we should be going after are the people funding these things. And if you apply the Insurrection Act, then you can begin to prosecute people for treason, people who are rebelling against lawful, legitimate federal authority. And that needs to happen. We have to come down hard on this. If we don't, it will metastasize and become much worse.
That's an excellent point you make, that those who had if the Insurrection Act is enacted, could be charged with treason if they're involved in the planning and orchestration of this. This is something I would have to believe the FBI under Kash Patel could very quickly get to the bottom of. We've already seen substantial evidence just from watching the videos online. This is the great thing about the internet. You can have Cory Booker telling us that the protests in California are mostly peaceful, and then in the very next minute you can see protesters dropping chunks of concrete onto moving ICE vehicles in an overpass. In one case, crashing through the windshield and injuring one of the officers. This is an all-out insurrection. Let me jump across the globe here for a moment, if I will, because it's another subject on which you have always been extraordinarily correct. Russia and Ukraine have now met twice in Turkey. The only thing that has emerged from those discussions was a large prisoner exchange. Do you see us any closer to getting a peace deal pertaining to Russia and Ukraine?
Unfortunately, Roger, I don't. And I think that President Trump has been sabotaged by people in the Senate and in the House, individuals who are desperate to keep this war going for any number of reasons. A good example is this Representative McCall from Texas. Other examples include Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal. The President of the United States has explicitly stated his desire to have peace in Ukraine, and these individuals have stepped forward and said, we want nothing to do with peace. Our goal is to destroy Russia. President Trump has made it very clear he's not interested in destroying Russia or harming Russia, nor should he be. But I think the only solution at this point is one we've discussed before, and that's for the president to simply end any further aid. He's the chief executive. He has authority. He can stop the aid, and then he can direct that all American citizens, in or out of uniform, in intelligence capacities or any capacity whatsoever in Ukraine, leave Ukraine. When he does that, the Ukrainian regime is finished, because the Europeans can't provide the equipment, the cash, or anything else to keep this going. And that's the quickest way to end the killing, because the Russians are now stuck. Since they're dealing with this madman Zelensky, who's determined to fight to the last Ukrainian, they have to fight even if it requires them to kill the last Ukrainian. That's something they don't want to do. It's something we shouldn't want anybody to do. So the president needs to be the leader he is and simply say, that's it, everybody out, this stops now.
Yeah, I suggested that if Senators Lindsey Graham and the Vietnam War hero Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut met privately with Zelensky and urged him not to make a peace deal with Donald Trump, they would be in violation of the Logan Act. There is no immunity for U.S. senators on that law. Now, I didn't say they did it. I said if they did it. We don't know if they did it, but they certainly undermined the United States. It's also abundantly clear that President Trump was not informed of the Ukrainian attack on the Russian airfield, in which a number of their bombers, their weapons were destroyed. So the Ukrainians are not operating in good faith. If you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking to Colonel Douglas Macgregor. You can find him at Our Country. Our Country. Where are we, Doug? Anyway, we'll be right back with more of Colonel Macgregor. Stand by and don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the zone with Colonel Douglas Macgregor, decorated combat veteran, defense and foreign policy consultant, geopolitical thinker. Found my notes here. You can find him at ourcountryourchoice.com, ourcountryourchoice.com. I recommend you go there for Doug's always brilliant analysis of the world situation. We were talking about the Russian and Ukrainian conflict. I was reading these chilling stories about conscriptions in Ukraine, where 14-year-olds, 12-year-olds are being essentially kidnapped on the streets to be put into military service. Are the Ukrainians running out of men?
I think they're running out of manpower, because most of the manpower that would have otherwise been available has left the country. And the other thing is that there are now gangs active inside Ukraine that are arming themselves to fight off these press gangs from the Ukrainian government. The population of Ukraine has had it with this war. It wants an end to it. So we know the government is no longer legitimate. When that sort of things happens, it's over. But you know, Roger, you said something that's very important that people need to know. Every day, the president is inundated with huge quantities of information. Neither you nor I were there, and neither of us could be absolutely certain what President Trump was told. But the Central Intelligence Agency provides him with a briefing whenever he wants it, and usually on a daily basis. It's the obligation of the director of the CIA to make known to him the intention of a covert operation in a place like Russia as a result of that Ukraine-Russia war. I don't know what Ratcliffe is doing, but that's his job. Obviously, he failed to tell the president, this is what's being planned. If this happens, these are the implications. That's his job, Roger.
Well, we know on two instances, the president himself in an interview learns for the first time about an assassination attempt on Putin, that they had an attack on Putin's helicopter. We heard it from his own mouth. He didn't know that. He wasn't aware of that, which means he was never told that. And then the White House put out a statement in the wake of Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Blumenthal's sit down with Zelensky, saying specifically that the president was not informed in advance of the unprecedented Ukrainian attack on the Russian airfields. So those seem to me to be two failures of his own CIA.
You're absolutely right. And you know from your own experience in Washington, every president since Harry Truman has had difficulties with the Central Intelligence Agency. And you've got to have someone in the agency who reports to you, who keeps you informed. You have to have someone looking out for your interests as president of the United States. And that's obviously not being done.
Well, we see similar problems at the FBI. We're now just learning that the FBI had an enormous tranche of Russian collusion hoax documents hidden within their computer system at an inaccessible location where neither Special Counsel John Durham nor the Inspector General of the Department of Justice could get them. Perhaps that would explain why his report was, the report of John Durham, missed so many key things. I have very high regard for Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. Anytime you get attacked by John Brennan, that's a badge of honor. He said he was appalled by the intelligence professionals that she was firing. And she was firing because they're not loyal to President Trump or to his agenda. She also referred a number of them to the Department of Justice for prosecution for leaking. She's kept a relatively low profile, but I think she's endeavoring to fix the problem you describe. And I frankly think she has the gumption and the experience to do so. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up there. I want to thank our guest, Colonel Douglas Macgregor. You can follow him by going to ourcountryourchoice.com, ourcountryourchoice.com. He always brings it, so I wanted to have him on the show. I completely agree with your assertion regarding what the president must do. He must enact the Insurrection Act immediately to give him the power to deal with what is coming. Nationwide insurrection planned with the assistance, I think, of enemies, both foreign and domestic. Thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Thanks again to Colonel Macgregor for joining us. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed. We always try to bring you the stone cold truth right here in the Stone Zone 5 days a week. Until tomorrow, again, ta-ta.
Thanks for listening to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear the Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?